Adam Schiff stepped into CNN's Studio C, expecting just another standard interview, but Tulsi Gabbard was waiting with a calculated trap that would make live television history. The segment had been running for 9 minutes when Adam Schiff set down his water glass and said something that changed the direction of the evening. He had been answering a question about intelligence community reform, measured, authoritative, the particular cadence of someone who has given this answer before and knows exactly where each sentence lands. The kind of answer that fills airtime without leaving edges. He talked about institutional integrity. He talked about the importance of keeping national security apolitical. He talked about the career professionals who dedicate their lives to keeping Americans safe, and the obligation of elected officials to support rather than undermine them. Then he paused, and his voice dropped slightly. The register people use when they want to signal that what comes next is reluctant, that they would prefer not to say it, but feel they must. And I think we have to be honest. And I want to be careful here, because some of this touches on matters I can't fully discuss in an open forum. But there are individuals who now hold positions of significant intelligence oversight, who have made statements and have relationships that our allies have flagged as deeply concerning. I'm not going to name names tonight, but I think the American people deserve to know that these concerns exist. They exist at the highest levels of our intelligence community, and they deserve to be taken seriously. He looked at the camera when he said it, not at Tulsi Gabbard, who was sitting 3 feet to his right. At the camera, Gabbard was looking at him. She had been looking at him since the middle of the previous sentence, when the sentence had begun to go somewhere specific. The pen she had been holding was on the table now, parallel to the edge, placed there with the deliberateness of someone setting something down because they will need both hands free. The moderator, Brian Lowry, CNN's senior national security correspondent, began transitioning toward his next question. He had 3 more prepared. He had timed the segment. Actually, 1 word. Lowry stopped mid-breath. I'd like to respond to that. Schiff reached for his water glass. It was still nearly full. He poured a small amount anyway. The segment was scheduled to run 22 minutes. It ran 41. CNN's Washington Bureau. Studio C. A round table. 3 chairs. Lowry at 12, Schiff at 9, Gabbard at 3. No audience, no gallery, no one to perform for except the 3 cameras and whatever was on the other side of them. The table had nothing on it when the segment began, except 3 water glasses and a small production monitor angled toward Lowry. Gabbard had a folder, thin, maybe a 1/4 inch thick, closed, which she had placed on the table to her right, and had not touched since sitting down. Before cameras rolled, Schiff had been talking to someone off to the left of the set. Something that made him laugh. The laugh of a man who is comfortable. He had done this many times. This table, this format, this subject territory, he had been navigating for years. When the floor director counted them in, he turned to face forward with the ease of someone returning to a familiar room. Gabbard, when the floor director counted them in, was already facing forward. She had been facing forward for approximately 2 minutes before the count. When the segment began, she looked at Lowry while he spoke. She did not look at Schiff. She did not look at the cameras. The segment's announced topic was intelligence oversight in the new administration. Lowry opened with a question about structural reforms at DNI. Schiff answered first. 3 minutes. Fluid. No notes. Gabbard answered second. 2 minutes. Specific. Also, no notes. Then Lowry asked about the relationship between congressional oversight committees and the executive intelligence apparatus. And Schiff had said what he said and placed it where he placed it, and looked at the camera rather than the person 3 feet to his right. And Gabbard had set her pen down and said 1 word. Congressman Schiff. Her voice was even, not warm, not cold, even the way a surface is, even when someone has taken care to make it so. You just told the American people that individuals in intelligence oversight positions have relationships that our allies have flagged as deeply concerning. I want to make sure I understand what you said. Schiff nodded, open, receptive, the posture of a man who welcomes scrutiny. Were you referring to me? I think there are broader concerns that... Were you referring to me? Yes or no? Lowry's hands were flat on the table. He did not reach for his notes. I'm speaking to a pattern of behavior that goes beyond any single individual, Congressman. The word came out the same way the first one had. Even, no edge in it, and no warmth either. I've been confirmed as Director of National Intelligence by the United States Senate. I hold a top-secret SCI clearance. I served 2 active duty tours in Iraq. If you have evidence, classified or otherwise, that I have inappropriate foreign relationships, you have a legal and ethical obligation to bring that to the relevant oversight bodies. A pause that lasted exactly as long as it needed to. Have you done that? My concerns have been raised through appropriate which bodies, which channels, when. Schiff's answer moved toward the complexity of the intelligence oversight structure, toward the sensitivity of certain information, toward his long record of working within appropriate channels. Gabbard listened. Her hands were on the table, one on top of the other. She did not pick up her pen when he finished. So, you raised concerns about me specifically, through appropriate channels, as you say, and those channels have not resulted in any action against me, any investigation of me, or any formal finding of any kind regarding my fitness to serve. I didn't say concerns about you specifically. You didn't say anything specifically. That's the problem. She looked at him. Let me try a different approach. She opened the folder, one sheet of paper. She glanced at it once to confirm something, then set it on the table face down and looked at Schiff. March 20th, 2017. NBC News, Meet the Press. You said, and I'm quoting you directly, I can tell you that the case is more than circumstantial, referring to evidence of coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. She did not look at the paper. You said this on national television. You said it as chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, meaning you had access to classified intelligence assessments that the American public did not have access to. Schiff's expression did not change. The Mueller report was released 2 years later. It found, and I'm quoting the report, the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. The air conditioning in the studio ran. A camera operator made a small adjustment to his position that produced a sound briefly, and then did not. What was the circumstantial evidence you were referring to in March of 2017? Schiff began his answer with the word look, the word people use when they need a half-second to decide what comes after it. Then he talked about the difference between the legal standard required for a Mueller finding and the intelligence community's broader analytical framework about the way intelligence assessments operate on probabilities rather than certainties, about the fact that coordination and conspiracy are not identical concepts under the law. It was a practiced answer. He had given versions of it before. Gabbard waited through all of it. When he finished, Congressman, you told the American people you had evidence, not questions, not concerns, not analytical probabilities. Evidence more than circumstantial were your exact words. She looked at him steadily. Do you retract that statement? His water glass was in front of him. He did not reach for it. I stand by the assessment that there was significant evidence of Russian interference in the 2016 election. That's not what I asked. And that the full scope of contacts between Trump campaign officials and Russian nationals raised legitimate questions that warranted serious investigation. Congressman, the same register, the same evenness. The question is whether you retract the specific claim that the evidence of coordination was more than circumstantial. The Mueller report said it wasn't. Do you retract it? Schiff said he believed the investigation had been incomplete. Gabbard looked at him for a moment. Let's talk about what you knew, she said. And when you knew it, Congressman Schiff. The second time she said his name, it had a different quality than the first. Not harder, more precise. The way you repeat a word when you want the person to hear it differently than they heard it the first time. You just told the American people that certain individuals in intelligence oversight positions have relationships that our allies have flagged as deeply concerning. She opened the folder, one sheet. She looked at it once and placed it face down. March 20th, 2017. NBC News. Meet the press. Your words. Direct quote. I can tell you that the case is more than circumstantial, referring to evidence of coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government. She did not look at the paper when she said it. She looked at him. You said this as chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. You had seen what the public hadn't seen. Your words carried that weight. Schiff's hands were on the table. The Mueller Report, Volume 1, Page 1, Executive Summary. The investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government in its election interference activities. She turned the paper over. The transcript was visible to anyone close enough to read it. The investigation that took 2 years, 500 witnesses, subpoena power, full access to financial records and communications. That investigation did not establish what you told the American people was more than circumstantial. A camera operator outside the frame made a small adjustment. The sound lasted half a second. What was the circumstantial evidence you were referring to in March of 2017? Schiff's answer moved through the difference between coordination in the intelligence analytical sense and conspiracy in the legal criminal sense. Through the documented contacts between campaign officials and Russian nationals, through his obligation as chairman to take seriously any evidence of foreign interference, regardless of political implications. Gabbard waded through it without moving. You told the American people you had evidence, not questions, not documented contacts that warranted investigation. Evidence more than circumstantial. She looked at him. The report said the evidence was insufficient. Do you retract the statement? I stand by the assessment that there was significant evidence of Russian. That is not what you said on Meet the Press. His water glass was 4 inches in front of him. He did not reach for it. The question is specific. You said the case was more than circumstantial. The Mueller report said it wasn't. Do you retract it? Schiff said he believed the investigation had been incomplete in important respects, and that subsequent developments had further complicated the picture. Gabbard looked at him for a moment. Then she closed the folder. Let's talk, she said, about what you knew while you were saying it. As chairman of HPSCI, you received classified intelligence briefings on the Russia investigation on a regular basis. Is that correct? That's correct. Those briefings would have included assessments from the CIA, the NSA, and the FBI, the actual evidentiary basis for what investigators had developed at any given point. Classified briefings cover a range of yes or no. A half-beat. The half-beat was visible. Yes. So when you stated publicly, repeatedly, over the course of approximately 2 years, that evidence of coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government was more than circumstantial, you were making that characterization based in part on what you had seen in classified briefings. You weren't extrapolating from public reporting. You were representing to the American public what the intelligence showed. Schiff began a careful answer about the nature of classified information and the legal constraints on what committee members could and could not discuss publicly. Yes or no, Gabbard said. The careful answer continued for another sentence. Gabbard waited for it to finish. I want to be precise about what I'm asking because I think the answer matters significantly. There are only two possibilities here. Either your classified briefings supported your public claim of more than circumstantial evidence, in which case the Mueller report contradicted what your briefings told you, and we should ask why a 2-year investigation reached a different conclusion than the intelligence you were seeing as chairman, or your classified briefings did not fully support that claim, in which case you told the public something stronger than what the intelligence you had access to actually showed. She looked at him across the table. Which one is it? Behind the production monitor, the segment producer later told a colleague. Nobody in the booth spoke for approximately 4 seconds. The floor director had one hand near his earpiece. Schiff talked about the complexity of intelligence analysis, the way assessments are probabilistic rather than definitive, the way they evolve as new information comes in, the way coordination in the intelligence analytical sense differs from conspiracy in the legal criminal sense, the way his role as chairman required him to take seriously any evidence suggesting serious problems, even when that evidence remained incomplete. It was a practiced answer. The sentences connected to each other. Nothing in it was demonstrably false. So the briefings were incomplete, Gabbard said. All intelligence assessments involve degrees of, but you characterize them to the public as more than circumstantial. She was not looking at the document she had placed on the table. She was looking at him. Not incomplete, not worthy of further investigation, not suggestive of a pattern that requires explanation. You said more than circumstantial. Those are words that mean the evidence is strong. That mean you've moved past the threshold where the conclusion is in serious doubt. She paused. You said that on Meet the Press in March of 2017 as the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, and the public heard those words as confirmation from the person most qualified to know that the evidence was real and substantial. Schiff refilled his water glass. He did so carefully, with the deliberateness of someone managing a moment. I acted in good faith, he said, on the totality of the information available to me at the time. I'm going to ask you to look at something. She opened the folder and produced the first sheet of paper, placing it on the table facing him. This is a summary of an intelligence assessment provided to HPSCI leadership, including the chairman, in the spring of 2017. It notes that while Russian interference in the 2016 election was confirmed and documented, the assessment of evidence regarding direct coordination with the Trump campaign was, I'm reading directly from the document, inconclusive and insufficient to support a finding of conspiracy or coordination at this time. Schiff looked at the document on the table in front of him. He did not move toward it. This assessment existed before your March 2017 Meet the Press appearance, before you told millions of Americans the evidence was more than circumstantial, before they organized their understanding of their country around what you said. I can't confirm or deny the existence of specific classified congressmen. Her voice was the same. Even. I was confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. I have the authority and the security clearance to discuss the existence of assessments of this kind. I'm asking whether you saw this assessment or one substantially like it before you made your public statements. Schiff's right hand was on the table. His thumb moved once against the inside of his palm. A small movement, not quite a gesture, not quite still. I acted on the information available to me in good faith, he said, and in the best interests of the American people and the integrity of our democratic process. That is the second time you've answered a question about a specific document with a statement about your good faith and your intentions. She picked up her pen, held it without writing. Let me ask you about something more specific. The counter memo your office released in February of 2018 to rebut the Nunes memo on FISA surveillance practices. Schiff's posture adjusted almost nothing. The micro-adjustment of someone recalibrating weight. Your memo stated that the Steele dossier played a limited role in the FISA warrant application for Carter Page. The following year, the Justice Department Inspector General, a career official, nonpartisan, appointed specifically to conduct this kind of review, found that the dossier played a central and essential role in the application. She looked at him. Central and essential. Limited. Those describe different things. The IG report's characterization was itself. Were the words central and essential in the IG report? A pause. Yes. But the context in which? Were the words limited role in your memo? Another pause, shorter. Yes. One of those descriptions is accurate. She set her pen down. Which one? Schiff talked about the complexity of the IG's methodology, about the ways in which legal analysts and former officials had disputed the IG's framing, about the broader finding that the investigation had been validly predicated despite procedural errors in the visa application process. Gabbard listened to all of it. When he finished, "I notice you didn't answer the question." Schiff reached for his water glass. He drank from it this time. "I want to ask you about something different," Gabbard said, "not what you said publicly. What happened to classified information during the period when you chaired HPSCI?" She did not reach for the folder when she said it. Her hands stayed where they were. The quality of Schiff's stillness changed in a way that was difficult to name precisely. He had been still before, controlled, measured, the stillness of someone managing a situation. This was different. The stillness now had something underneath it. The Intelligence Community Inspector General opened a review in 2020 into a pattern of classified information appearing in media reporting that originated from closed HPSCI sessions. Are you aware of that review? I've always handled classified information in strict accordance with. I'm asking if you're aware of the review. A beat. I'm aware there were concerns raised about unauthorized disclosures generally, specifically about disclosures from HPSCI sessions, closed sessions, sessions where only members and cleared staff were present, people with clearances, people who had signed non-disclosure agreements, people who understood exactly what they were not permitted to do with what they heard. She looked at him steadily. During 2019 and 2020, there were multiple instances where specific details from closed HPSCI testimony appeared in major news outlets. The New York Times, The Washington Post, CNN, within 24 hours of the testimony being given. In several cases, within hours of the session ending. Lowry glanced at his notes. The specificity of the information that appeared in those stories, witness names, testimony quotes, procedural details, was not the kind of information that could have come from sources outside the room. It came from someone inside. She picked up her pen, held it without writing, and the information that was disclosed was consistently damaging to Republican witnesses and consistently aligned with the Democratic impeachment narrative, every time, without exception. Unauthorized disclosures are a serious problem that I have consistently. The pattern. Congressman. Her voice was the same as it had been for the last 25 minutes. Even unhurried. In the intelligence community, when classified information is disclosed consistently in one direction, always damaging to one side, always useful to the other, without a single instance that runs the other way, we call that a strategic disclosure. It isn't accidental. It isn't a security failure. It is a deliberate, operational decision about what information to release and when. A pause. And strategic disclosures of classified information are a federal offense. Schiff's answer covered his long record of opposing unauthorized disclosures, his cooperation with any appropriate review process, his commitment to the principle that the integrity of the oversight process required protecting sensitive information. Gabbard waited through the full answer. When it ended, who on your staff was interviewed as part of the IG review? The answer shifted toward personnel privacy and the appropriate handling of HR matters within the committee structure. The review concluded in 2021. Gabbard said, "It is not ongoing and has not been ongoing for 3 years. Personnel privacy does not apply to a completed federal investigation." She opened the folder and placed the second document on the table facing him. Not facing the cameras, facing him. This is a partial record of witness interview requests made during the review. 3 members of your committee staff declined to be interviewed without immunity agreements in place. 1 staff member resigned during the course of the review before being interviewed. Schiff looked at the document on the table in front of him. His water glass was 4 inches to the right of it. He did not reach for either. Congressman, did you know that members of your staff had requested immunity before agreeing to cooperate with the Inspector General's review? Personnel matters involving "Did you know?" The studio's air conditioning ran. Lowry had not written anything on his notepad in 14 minutes. His pen was on the table, capped. "I was aware," Schiff said carefully, "that staff members had sought legal counsel during that period, which is their right. Seeking legal counsel and requesting immunity before testifying are different things. People request immunity when they believe their truthful testimony might expose them to criminal prosecution." She looked at him. "Did you know they had requested immunity?" "I supported my staff's right to appropriate legal representation." "That is the 3rd time you've answered a question about immunity with a statement about legal counsel." She set her pen down. "I'll ask it one more time. Did you know before or during the IG review that members of your staff had requested immunity agreements as a condition of their cooperation?" Schiff said he had tried to be as supportive as possible of all appropriate oversight processes while respecting the legal rights of the individuals involved. Gabbard looked at him for a moment. Then she closed the folder. "I'll come back to that," she said. "First, I want to ask you something about what you said at the top of this segment. You told the American people tonight that individuals in intelligence oversight positions have relationships that our allies have flagged as deeply concerning." She looked at him. "You declined to confirm whether you were referring to me. I'm going to make it simple." She waited a moment before the question. "Not for effect. The way you wait when you want to make sure what you say next is exactly what you mean. Do you believe I am a threat to national security? I think there are legitimate questions, yes or no, that have been raised by career intelligence professionals about certain statements and associations. Do you believe I am a threat to national security?" The question came out the same way both times, same pace, same register. The repetition made it heavier rather than lighter. The way asking someone's name twice makes it clear you expect an answer. Schiff said he believed in the importance of serious, rigorous oversight of anyone in a senior intelligence oversight position, regardless of their political affiliation. "That's a yes or a no question. I'm asking you to answer it." He would not say yes. He would not say no. He spoke about the gravity of the intelligence oversight responsibility, about the concerns that existed at multiple levels of the intelligence community, about his obligation to take those concerns seriously, without prejudging any individual based on their party affiliation or their prior record. Gabbard waited through all of it. She did not look at Lowry. She did not look at the cameras. She watched Schiff the way you watch something you are going to respond to when it stops moving. When he finished, there was a moment, a brief, unperformed moment before she spoke. "I enlisted in the Hawaii Army National Guard in 2003, she said. "I was 21 years old. I deployed to Iraq in 2004. Logistical support area, Anaconda, Balad. It was one of the most frequently targeted installations in the theater. projectiles, rockets, indirect fire on a near-daily basis during the early part of that deployment. I was there for 12 months. She was not reading from anything. She was not looking at her hands or at the table. She was looking at Schiff with the directness of someone who has decided to be direct and has set everything else aside. I deployed again in 2008. I hold a top-secret, sensitive compartmented information clearance that has been reviewed, investigated, and renewed multiple times by career security professionals whose job is specifically to identify counterintelligence concerns. I was confirmed as Director of National Intelligence by 62 votes in the United States Senate, following the most thorough background investigation that exists in the federal government, conducted by those same career professionals you invoke when it suits your argument. She paused one beat. How many times have you deployed, Congressman? Schiff said he had not served in the military. The camera was on him when he said it. He held its gaze. How many times have you been in a location where people were actively trying to eliminate you? I don't think military service is. I'm not making an argument about military service. I'm making an argument about credibility. Her voice had not risen. If anything, it had done the opposite, gotten quieter, in the way that a beam of light gets narrower when it's concentrated. You questioned my loyalty to this country tonight on national television in front of however many people are watching. You did it without naming me, without a specific allegation, without a single verifiable claim that I could examine, challenge, or answer. You did it with the words, certain individuals and relationships that have been flagged, and concerns at the highest levels. Language specifically designed to imply something serious, while committing to nothing specific enough to be tested. Lowry's hands were flat on the table. He was not looking at his notes. I want to talk about loyalty, not loyalty to a country. That's not in question here, and you know it isn't. Loyalty to the truth. She looked at him steadily, because the documented record, time-stamped on the congressional record, submitted to federal investigators, shows that you told the American people you had evidence you did not have, that you released a memo that the Inspector General of the Justice Department found inaccurate in material respects, that you chaired a committee from which classified information was disclosed consistently, systematically, and exclusively in one political direction, and that tonight, in this studio, you implied that someone who has served this country in uniform and in intelligence leadership for 18 years has foreign relationships that threaten national security. She paused, without a single specific claim. The air conditioning ran. I have been under fire, she said. I have watched people next to me get hurt. I have filled out the paperwork that follows when that happens. I have spent 18 years serving a country that you have spent your career using as the backdrop for your political narrative. She looked at him directly. Don't talk to me about loyalty. The 8 seconds that followed were, according to the segment producer, the longest she had experienced in 11 years of live political television. Schiff's water glass was directly in front of him. He did not reach for it. He did not look at Lowry. He looked at the surface of the table, the middle distance between his folded hands and the near edge, the place people look when they are doing something internal that takes a moment. Then he began to answer. He said he would never question anyone's military service, that he had the deepest respect for those who wore the uniform. He said his concerns were about specific policy positions and specific public statements, not about anyone's patriotism or personal character. He said that rigorous oversight was something he applied equally, and that the questions he raised were in the American people's interest, not in his own. The words were the right words. They were words he had used before, in contexts where they had worked. They landed differently here, not because Gabbard had shouted or attacked or produced evidence that directly contradicted them, because the preceding 30 minutes had built a specific kind of structure and these words were being placed on top of it, and the structure did not support them the way it would have supported them earlier in the evening. He said it to both of them. Neither of them moved immediately. Gabbard's hands were on the table. Her folder was closed. Schiff's 2 documents were still on the table in front of him. The classified assessment summary, the witness interview record, where she had placed them, and where he had not touched them. A floor director crossed into the frame briefly to hand Lowry something. The camera cut away before he reached him. When they came back from break, Schiff had his water glass in front of him, freshly refilled by a production assistant. Gabbard's glass had not been touched. "I have one more question," she said, "and I want to ask it carefully." She did not open the folder. She did not reach for either of the documents that were still on the table in front of Schiff. She put both hands flat on the table and looked at him. "You spent 2 years telling the American people that the President of the United States had coordinated with a foreign government to manipulate an election. You said on multiple occasions, on multiple platforms, that you had seen evidence, that the case was more than circumstantial, that the evidence was in plain sight." She looked at him. "Millions of people organized their understanding of their country around what you told them. They believed you because you were the chairman of the Intelligence Committee, because you had access to information they didn't have, because your job was to know." Schiff was looking at her. "My question is not about the evidence itself. We've talked about the evidence." She paused. "My question is about what you knew the evidence wasn't. And when you knew it." The camera was on Schiff. He was still. "Because if you told the American people the case was more than circumstantial, while your classified briefings showed the evidence was inconclusive, while you were sitting in rooms, seeing assessments that said the evidence was insufficient to support a finding of coordination, then what you did was not an error in judgment. It was not an aggressive but good faith interpretation of ambiguous intelligence." She let that sit. "It was a deliberate misrepresentation to the public you were elected to serve, using your position as chairman of the Intelligence Committee, using the authority and credibility that position gives you, to tell people something you had reason to believe was not true." A camera operator shifted his weight. The movement produced a small sound, and then nothing. "And if someone in my position did that, if I went on television as Director of National Intelligence and told the public something I knew my classified briefings contradicted, you would be the first person at this table calling for consequences. You would be giving speeches about the sacred obligation to tell the truth to the American people. You would be demanding accountability." She looked at him. "So I want to ask you, on camera, on the record, did you know that the evidence was weaker than you were telling the public it was?" Schiff's answer was the longest of the evening. He talked about the good faith obligation to take seriously any evidence of foreign interference in American democracy. He talked about the complexity of intelligence analysis and the way assessments evolve. He talked about the fact that subsequent investigations had confirmed significant Russian interference, even if the legal standard for a conspiracy finding was not met. He talked about acting in the best interests of the American people with the information available. He talked for nearly 3 minutes. When he finished, Gabbard looked at him for a moment. "You said you acted in good faith based on available information?" "Yes, and the available information, including your classified briefings as HPSCI chairman, supported your public characterization of more than circumstantial evidence." A pause that was different from the other pauses, shorter and heavier. "Intelligence assessment is not a binary, Congressman. One word. Did the classified briefings support your public statements?" The studio was quiet. "I acted on the totality of the information." "That's not a yes." He did not say yes. He did not say no. Gabbard picked up the folder. The thin folder with its 3 documents, 2 of which were now on the table in front of Schiff, and one of which was still inside, and closed it. She placed it parallel to the edge of the table. The American people were told a story, she said, for 2 years, by someone who sat in rooms where they were shown classified intelligence assessments, and then walked out of those rooms and went on television. She was not looking at him anymore. She was looking at the camera. The first time in 41 minutes, she had looked directly at the camera rather than at the man 3 feet to her right. That story shaped how tens of millions of people understood their government, their democracy, and each other. It drove families apart. It drove people to conclusions about their neighbors. It told them that the most serious possible thing, a president who had sold out his country, had happened, and that the evidence was right there, that someone had seen it, that it was more than circumstantial. She paused. The question that has never been answered, that was not asked in any of the hearings, that was not in any of the reports, is whether the person saying those things knew they weren't true when he said them. She looked at Lowry. I don't have anything else. Lowry thanked both of them. He said something about the importance of these conversations. He began his closing remarks. Schiff's folder, the document Gabbard had placed facing him, was still on the table in front of him. He was looking at it, not reading it. Looking at it the way you look at something when you are not sure what it says about you, that someone put it there. His water glass was full. He had not touched it since the production assistant refilled it before the second half of the segment. The segment ran 41 minutes and 23 seconds. CNN had allocated 22. The first clip to go was not from the last section. It was not from the classified briefing's confrontation. Not from the moment Gabbard placed the first document on the table. Not from the final question that Schiff did not answer. It was 6 words. How many times have you deployed? 8 million views in 18 hours. The clips spread the way things spread when they touch something that doesn't require explanation on either side of the political divide. Sent by people who agreed with Gabbard. Sent by people who disagreed with her. Sent by people who had no strong opinion about either of them, but recognized the specific weight of a question that doesn't have a good answer. The clip had no title. The accounts that posted it mostly just posted it. People understood what they were looking at without being told. The full segment got 3 million views in the same period. The ratio attracted enough attention in media industry circles that a newsletter covering political television ran a short item on it. Viewers were finding the clip first, then going back to find the 41 minutes that preceded it. It was the reverse of the usual pattern, where a strong, full segment generates viral clips. Here, the clip was generating the audience for the segment it came from. The segment producer, in an email to a colleague that was later shared without attribution, described the experience of sitting behind the monitor during the uniform exchange as the longest 8 seconds I've ever worked through without going to commercial. She did not specify which 8 seconds she meant. People who watched the segment understood which 8 seconds she meant. CNN's Standards and Practices team reviewed the segment within 2 hours of air. They were looking at 2 specific questions: whether the documents Gabbard had placed on the table raised any issues regarding classified information disclosure, and whether the segment's deviation from its scheduled 22 minutes required any additional editorial review. On the first question, the documents Gabbard placed on the table were not read aloud in full on air, were not held up to cameras, and were not described in sufficient detail to constitute a classified disclosure. The review team noted this and moved on. On the second question, the segment had run long because the participants had continued engaging rather than accepting natural breaks. This was not unusual. The review was closed. CNN's fact-check team published within 90 minutes of the segment ending. The more than circumstantial claim, March 20, 2017, Meet the Press, was rated as unresolved. The rating was accompanied by a note that the Mueller report's language was in direct tension with the characterization Schiff had used. The rating was not false. It was unresolved, which, in the specific grammar of political fact-checking, occupies a category that is worse than disputed and better than false, and which has the particular disadvantage of being the rating that stays attached to a claim the longest, because it cannot be retired by a correction or a retraction. An unresolved rating stays unresolved until it is resolved. The claim had been rated unresolved once before in 2019. That rating had been largely ignored. This time, 3 other outlets ran their own analyses before midnight. One of them reached a conclusion slightly more favorable to Schiff's position. 2 of them did not. MSNBC's evening programming addressed the segment with a panel that included 2 former intelligence officials and a legal analyst. The host framed the segment as an example of bad faith Republican attacks on legitimate oversight. One of the former intelligence officials, career, served under 4 administrations spanning both parties, not a political appointee, said something that the other panelists did not directly rebut. He said that the question Gabbard had raised about the relationship between classified briefings and public characterizations was a question that had not been asked in any formal proceeding related to the Russia investigation, that it was a legitimate question, and that the fact that it had not been answered in any formal setting was worth noting. The host thanked him and moved to the next topic. The former intelligence official's 63 seconds of commentary were clipped and shared separately from the rest of the panel. The clip got 400,000 views. The people who shared it were not all from the same side of the political divide. The progressive media response was organized and moved quickly. Gabbard had echoed Russian talking points. The more than circumstantial characterization had been supported by the Senate Intelligence Committee's bipartisan report, the most thorough congressional investigation of Russian interference ever conducted. The implication that Schiff had misled the public was itself a piece of the disinformation campaign she had been accused of amplifying for years. The Senate Intelligence Committee's bipartisan report was cited across platforms accurately. The report confirmed Russian interference in the 2016 election. It confirmed contacts between Trump campaign officials and Russian-connected individuals. It confirmed that some of those contacts were troubling and warranted the investigation that followed. It did not conclude that those contacts constituted criminal coordination or conspiracy. That distinction was the same distinction the Mueller report had drawn. It was the distinction Schiff's public characterizations had consistently blurred over 2 years of television appearances. 3 reporters covering the story noted this distinction in their articles. 2 of them worked for outlets with no strong ideological investment in the outcome. Their pieces reached readers who had not been looking for them. The third worked for a publication with a long, critical record on Schiff. His piece was shared by people who would have shared it regardless of what it said. The 2 neutral pieces reached more people than the third. More slowly, less loudly. They reached people who were still deciding what they thought. Schiff's office released a statement at 8:47 the following morning. The statement defended his record on Russia oversight at length. It cited the Senate Intelligence Committee report. It described the segment as a political attack by someone whose record on national security deserves serious scrutiny. It used the phrase bad faith twice. The statement did not address the specific question of what his classified briefings had shown before his March 2017 Meet the Press appearance. It did not address the HPSCI counter-memo and the Inspector General's finding that it had materially mischaracterized the role of the Steele dossier. It did not address the immunity requests from his staff during the IG review. A reporter for Politico emailed his office 4 specific questions, each drawn from one of those topics, each phrased to allow a direct answer. The office responded with a statement. The statement addressed the general subject of intelligence oversight and the importance of accountability in democratic institutions. It did not answer any of the 4 questions. The reporter noted this explicitly in her article. The article ran above the fold in the morning digital edition. By afternoon, it had been shared enough times that it appeared in aggregators that did not typically cover Schiff's office specifically. In the 6 weeks after the segment, 3 things happened that were not publicly connected to each other. Schiff's office declined 2 invitations to appear on Sunday morning programs to discuss intelligence reform and oversight. Both invitations had been extended with standard advanced notice, the kind of invitation his office had historically accepted without difficulty. Both times, the office cited scheduling conflicts. A producer at one of the programs later described the declinations as unusual, given the timing and the relevance of the topics to Schiff's public profile. A senior Democratic senator, not from California, not a close Schiff ally, was asked by a reporter at a hallway availability whether the intelligence community's conduct during the Russia investigation warranted additional review. The senator said, "I think accountability matters for all institutions and all public officials." He did not say Schiff's name. The reporter asked a follow-up. The senator had already begun walking. A former CIA analyst, who had publicly and repeatedly defended Schiff during the impeachment proceedings, published a piece in a foreign policy journal. The piece argued that the intelligence oversight structure needed reform to prevent classified information from being selectively characterized for political effect, specifically, to prevent the authority that comes with a committee chairmanship from being used to imply the existence of evidence stronger than the underlying intelligence supports. The piece did not name Schiff. It did not name anyone. It described a pattern of behavior with enough specificity that a number of journalists who read it noted the obvious reference, without being able to attribute the piece's argument directly to a named individual. The piece circulated more heavily in intelligence community networks than in political ones. People who had spent careers in those networks recognized what was being described. Several of them shared it without comment. The question Gabbard had asked at the end of the segment, the final one, the one that Schiff had answered for nearly 3 minutes without answering, had a quality that made it durable in a specific way. It was not a gotcha. It was not sprung from a document, or a clip, or a piece of evidence that could be disputed or contextualized away. It was a question that granted Schiff the most generous possible interpretation of his own conduct, the possibility that he had genuinely believed what he was saying, that his classified briefings had genuinely supported his public characterizations, that the whole sequence had been good faith all the way down, and asked him to confirm that interpretation. He could not confirm it. And in not confirming it, in answering for nearly 3 minutes in ways that were technically responsive but substantively evasive, he had answered it in the only way that made the question persist. 6 months after the segment, when Schiff appeared in any context that touched on the Russia investigation or intelligence oversight, journalists asked versions of the question, not always, not every outlet, but with enough regularity that his communications team, according to someone who worked adjacent to that team, began preparing background materials specifically designed to address it. The materials did not close the question. The question stayed open, the way certain questions stay open. Not because no one engages with them, but because the engagement itself demonstrates that the question cannot be fully answered, and that demonstration compounds over time rather than diminishing. After the segment ended, production assistants moved through the studio, clearing the table. One of them found Gabbard's folder still on the table. She had left it when she stood up to have her mic removed. The assistant picked it up, noted that it had documents inside, and placed it on the production equipment cart to be handled according to protocol. At some point, it was returned to Gabbard's office. The specific chain of handoffs was not logged. Schiff's 2 water glasses, the original and the refilled one, were collected with the rest of the segment's materials and washed. Standard procedure, same as every segment. His side of the table had been clean when the segment began. His side of the table was clean when the assistants finished clearing it. There had been nothing on his side of the table at any point during the 41 minutes. That had been his choice, arriving with nothing. The two documents Gabbard had placed in front of him, the classified assessment summary and the witness interview record, she had taken with her when she left the studio. She had not forgotten them on the table. She had picked them up deliberately, along with the third document still in the folder, the one she had not used. No one asked her afterward what the third document was.